So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our session on building accessible Microsoft Word documents that is being brought to us by Paige. I'm Sherry Prupis, Director of Teaching and Learning with Technology, as well as the Director of the Accessibility Compliance Initiative. Over the next couple of weeks, we will be running some special sessions for this one, Word, for PowerPoint, Excel, for Google, and so on. So you will have an opportunity to refresh your skills, or if you're new to the VCCS, to learn them for the first time. It is my pleasure to introduce Paige, who's our VCCS accessibility provider, who's going to talk to us about Microsoft Word. Thank you.
Yes. All right. So happy is today Wednesday? Yeah, Thursday. I don't even know what day. It's Thursday. I am on the right day. And welcome. And so we are going to talk a lot, and we're only going to talk about Word today, nothing else. So if you need something else and you came to this session today and you wanted something else Microsoft related, please put it in the chat or in the Q&A, whichever you have access to, which I'm not sure. So Sherry will be taking care of questions. But I want to start by talking about first of all, I'm going to give you access. I will give you a document at the end that is going to go through every single thing that I talk about during this workshop today. And then I will also give you a copy of the slides. So both the things you will have access to so that you can use them as a reference going forward. All right. So I need to make sure that I'm on the right screen because, why would I want to be on the wrong screen? All right. The compliance deadline is real. April 24th is not that far away. And this applies to all digital content in which Word documents are part of that if they're living anywhere on a computer. So we're going to talk about the overview, building an accessible document from scratch. And then we're going to talk about all of the other things that you need to make sure that you do as you are building or remediating any documents that you may have. And yeah, I'm kind of going through this part pretty quick because I want to spend more time on the actual showing you the tools inside of Word. So what are the 4 principles? These are the 4 principles that are necessary for the documents that you are creating. So alt text, color contrast, and text alternatives, keyboard navigation, logical reading order, clear, consistent language and structure with headings, and properly tagged items and then also using the accessibility checker that is built into Word. So when you're building out your documents or you're remediating, now you can see that the headings are going to be where you begin. So if you already have a document or you're building a document, that's what you're going to think about when you're structuring these documents. So the one thing you can then think about after that is any images, charts, infographics, and things like that. That's going to be your alt text. Then you can worry about tables. Do tables have a header row? Do they have a header column? Do they need both? Then color contrast. Did you make sure that if you put color in there, that it was at least 4.5 for 12-point font or 3.1 for 18-point font? And then the last thing is, did you put any links in and are they descriptive? So let's talk about building the accessible document. So the first thing that most people don't even think about is making sure that your document language is set. Most of the time, I'm going to say that it's already set. But in case you happen to receive an error that says your document language was not set, I want to go over how do you find that. So I'm moving screens around. So 1 second. And I'm going to share Word with you. All right. So this is obviously a blank document. And now I'm going to go to File. And I'm going to go to Options, which are at the very bottom, which you probably can't see. And then here you're going to go to Language. And there it is. So if you have something there, then that's fine. But if you don't, then that's where you would put it. It's a one-time thing. So once you've done it and set that as your default, you don't have to do that again. So that's going to be step one. So the next thing that most people don't ever think about, and you can either do this next step as step two, or you can actually save it for later. It just depends. So the next step that you are going to look at is a title. And I'm not talking about a title as far as on the page. I'm talking about a title and the metadata. So the problem without a title is that screen readers and PDF show the file name rather than the title. So we have to put the title in, which yesterday when I was at Virginia Peninsula, I asked a question on how many people know where the info tab is in Microsoft Word. And the answer was like 2 out of a room of 50 or 60. So this is something that is not very common, but it does need to become part of your checklist as you're building out documents. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do something. So this is slightly different. So I'm going to say, and today's theme is Star Wars. And we'll just leave it at that. So I'm going to now make this a heading 1. And now I have, now that's how I'm going to begin. So I'm just going to go ahead, copy that. Now I'm going to show you where to find the info. So I'm going to go to File. Now, by the way, you can change this if you want to later, but info is in the left-hand side. When I click on info, properties is in the second column. I'm not sharing the right screen, so hold on a second. Info is right here. You can see where my mouse is hovering. Properties is where you're going to go next. You're going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4. Fifth item down is title. Now, you could just retype the title in, or you can put in the title that you copied, and obviously I didn't get all the letters, so let me fix that. And now I have put in the title. That is a key function of screen readers. That title is very important. And if you convert it to a PDF and you don't have a title there, and again, it is not accessible. It's the same thing with the Word documents. So that is going to be step 2. So let me go back one more time and show everybody exactly how I did this. I went to File, Info, Properties here, and it's the 5th item down, Title. And that's where your title and your metadata goes. All right. Now, once we've done those 2 things, now we can kind of start thinking about what we want to do next. And what we want to do next is start building out the document with headings. Headings create the structure. They're also tagged so that a screen reader can maneuver between the heading structure and pretty much fix or do anything that needs to be done when it comes to the accessibility piece. So when you are building out any kind of document, it's best to have only one heading 1. However, I'm going to also tell you that it isn't wrong to have more than one heading 1. But you may find that you do have some error messages when you have more than one heading 1. So you're going to start with a heading 1, which is what I did in that document. And then you can change the font and the size of the font once you've properly tagged the heading. So now I'm going to go to, just one second. I'm looking for some copy and paste stuff so I don't have to try to reinventing the wheel. Except my Zoom toolbar is in the way. There we go. Now I can see what I'm doing. Okay, I'm going to copy some paste and some information in here into our Word document now. All right. So what I did is I just got a whole bunch of text so that we can work through this rather than me having to type it all. So this obviously is a heading 1. So this is going to be my subtitle. And what I'm going to use for subtitles, I'm going to use heading 2. Now, moving on from that, as you can see over on the left, it's starting to build out a little outline or table of contents of the information. Now, I want to go back for 1 second. If you choose to use, I could have done this as a subtitle, as you see here. But if you notice that when I do that, it disappears from the list. But now I have another problem. So now I have the problem of this is a heading 1, except you can't see that. So this is a heading 1, and this is a heading 3. There's no heading 2. So you can't skip. So now since I changed the subtitle to a subtitle, now I have to change this to a heading 2 because you can't go from a 1 to a 3. So it has to be in hierarchical. That's the word. I think I said it right. And so that's how you would move through this. So you can see that as I move through the document, now I have another Roman numeral. So I would make that a heading 2. And I have another area that I want to define within heading 2. And you can see here, I have a heading. I need that to also be a heading 3. And I need this to be a heading 3. And so that's how you're going to start moving through your document. You're going to, if you just have the document as you're building it, that's what you do. But if you are like I just did, and I actually just copied and pasted from something else, now I have to go through and put in the headings as they need to be. Now, what you're seeing on the left is what it's beginning to look like. And it is a table of contents. That's exactly what you're building. And
Paige, does it build automatically, or do you have to do something to open that navigation pane?
okay, so mine automatically opens because I use it so much. But if you don't see the navigation pane, there are a few places that you can look. So you can do one of two things. You can go to View, and then wait a minute. Is it? Yes, it's right here. So you see how my navigation pane box is checked? So that tells me that every time I open a Word document, that navigation pane stays open. However, if you don't want to see it or you want to turn it on a different way, you can go to Review and then go to Check Accessibility. Don't click on the little icon. Actually click on the down arrow. And here is also where you can find the navigation pane. So that's two places that you can.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You can see those kinds of things. So that is how you begin to put in the headings. Now, I'm going to go back one more time because now that I'm on a different tab. So if you are looking at your document and you're looking at Microsoft in the ribbon, and you're like, I don't see where it says styles. Styles is going to be found under the home tab, and it's going to be, should be around the center. Now, please understand that I am using the Word app on my computer. I am not using Office 365, which is the browser-based version of Word. The reason being is you are more limited with your tools than you are if you use the Word app. So I wanted to make sure that that is very clear. All right, so now we've talked about headings. So we have a title or a heading one. Now, I understand that some people want to use the actual style title, which you see there, which is fine, but you still have to start with a heading one. So now you have to decide, well, what are you going to make the title and what are you going to make a heading one? The compliance guidelines state that your document should start with a heading one. So you have options. Again, Microsoft gives you more options than just for accessibility. So please understand that's why these other things are here. All right. So now I want to go back to, and so that's headings, and that's how you do that. So now I want to talk about something else. Bullets or lists. So when you are building out any kind of list, you may find that you might want to start it with a, I'll get it out, a dash or an asterisk. Microsoft is actually pretty smart, and if you do that over, it will actually put the bullets in most of the time, but that's not always the case. So the issue is because when a screen reader reaches a list, what it reads is list of 5 items, item 1 of 5. Okay, so that's why when you are building out, you need to make sure you actually use the function in Microsoft Word to put in a list. Okay, so I already have a list and a couple lists in my document that I was showing you before. And here's the first one. Now, because this is properly formatted, and I can tell that is because at the top up here, you see that the little tool that is highlighted is the numbering. And that numbering tells me that it is the actual tool for using and putting in a list so that the list is tagged properly for a screen reader. Now, if I scroll down a little bit more and I highlight this list, now you can also see that it's, again, it's bulleted. Now it's the bullet tool that's highlighted. And so that I can, now if I, let's just say I remove the formatting for this. Do this. So now I don't have a list. And if I go back here and I put in a dash, notice that now it's not a list anymore. Now the tool is not highlighted and now it isn't a list. So this would be very problematic. Now I'm going to delete this. And let's say I have a list that's not properly formatted. I can highlight the list and then I can go to the bullet tool and type the bullet tool. And now I have a properly formatted list. Now it also changed the spacing, but that's totally irrelevant. I don't really care about that. If I wanted to, I can highlight this and I can change the spacing here. So now I've changed the spacing. Doesn't really matter. That's kind of an irrelevant thing. So that's how you're going to start thinking about your document is lists and making sure that you're using the built-in Microsoft tool to create a properly formatted list. All right, now let's go back and talk about the next item, which would be links. So in Microsoft, there are a few ways to add links. I'm going to grab some links in just a second. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. And you can see that click here is problematic, as well as read more info or read more, or just pasting in a raw URL that starts with HTTPS, right? So if there are a couple ways to do this. You can either take the URL and put it in first and then make it descriptive, or you can put in the descriptive text, highlight it, and then make it a hyperlink. So I'm going to show you actually kind of both of those things. All right, so I just needed some links, and now I have them. All right, so here we are in we have Works Cited, right? And so these are all descriptive, but not descriptive links. So it's descriptive at the beginning, but the link itself is a raw URL. So I have a couple of options. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the text from the descriptive part. And now I'm going to right click in the middle of the URL. I'm going to click on Edit Hyperlink. And now I'm going to go up to the top where it says Text to Display. That's where I'm going to change that text. And it's now going to say, what's the difference between Legends and Canon? And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now you can see that it's automatically changed the raw URL to a descriptive URL. Now, if we are talking specifically about APA and MLA, I am not going to get into that conversation because that is something that is going to have to change. If it is APA or MLA and it is required to have links, as you see like here, as raw URLs, then you cannot put in descriptive links because then it doesn't meet the APA and MLA criteria anymore, and that's problematic. However, let's just pretend that this is not for an English class and I am not doing it for APA Chicago or anything else. I am just making sure that any link that I have in my document is appropriately descriptive wherever it's taking the person. Now, I also want to, so this is obviously a Reddit post, which is fine. And I'm going to copy this text again. And this time I'm going to right click and go to edit hyperlink. And I'm going to do the exact same thing again, except there's something else that you can add. So if you want this to, it's going to open in a new tab, opens in new tab, or opens on web. Okay, I'm going to put that a bit of information in there so that if somebody was hearing that, they would know that they were going to be leaving the document and going to the internet. So that's why I put that information. If I had a PDF or another document that it was taking them to, I might include that. For example, I might say PDF, comma, 5 megabytes or whatever the size of the PDF is, so that they know exactly where they're going and things like that. So these are all links that are raw and I would need to change them. But the key piece of it is being descriptive. Where are you taking them? And making sure that you can add a screen information like opens on the web or PDF or anything like that, if that's necessary to the document or to the person who's listening. All right, so now we've talked about those few things. So, and I have to remember what time I started, not what time I'm finishing. And now I'm going to go and talk about some contrast. So color contrast, you can see that that there's a minimum of 4.5 to 1 for 12-point font. That's normal text. And then for large font, it's 18, it's 3 to 1. Or notice that it says 14 point plus bold is also 3 to 1. You can never use color alone to convey meaning. So, in other words, you can't say items in red are overdue. So that's, if they're overdue, then they need to be marked some way, whether that's a list or something else, but it cannot just be color alone to convey meaning. So let's go back and look at, we're just going to use some of these links because why not? I'm going to go back to Word. And now I'm going to change the hyperlink color. I think I am. To something darker. And I want to see if Microsoft is how it's feeling today about being smart or not smart. So I made these three a different color hyperlink. Why? Because it just makes this a little bit easier. So now I'm going to go to review and I'm going to go ahead and click check accessibility. Funny, it tells me that hard to read contrast is not a problem. But we all know that I just made this inaccessible. So this is another reason that it's good to understand exactly what the accessibility rules are. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to change these again. And if you hover over the color, do you see underneath where it says good contrast? And if I go back up to the top, you see where it says low contrast. So this is a great way for you to figure out if you have the right color. So I'm going to go ahead again and I'll pick this. I don't know. I think it's this one. It says that this is good contrast. So again, I don't know when you're highlighting and you go back to the color, it says it's good. Oh, that's because I forget. I'm in dark mode. If it were on a white background, and I can change that so you can see it, you would see that the color that I picked was actually pretty good. But if I changed the color, it looks great on a black background. But if I change this to light mode, then it's not going to be viewable. So I'm going to go up here and now I'm going to switch it. So now you can see what this looks like in light mode. Okay, so you can see that this link right here is very difficult to read. So I can come here, I can change it to whatever I need to change it to. I can even make it green. That's really dark green. But what you're looking for is whether or not it is good contrast. So again, you can highlight the text. You can either use the little tiny ribbon, the little tiny helper ribbon that pops up here, and do that. But also notice that you have the option to turn on high contrast only. Now, when you turn on high contrast only inside of Microsoft Word, it eliminates any choices. Now, if I go back to dark mode, and I do the exact same thing, now it still gives me the exact options that I need in order for it to be high contrast. So if I really want a purpley pink, I can choose that purpley pink and know that it is automatically going to meet the standard. So I will show you that one more time because that's not a tool that most people even know exists. So Dewey, if you could put your comment in the chat, that'd be great, or in the Q&A. So you can either do font color here and turn on the high contrast only from the mini toolbar is what I call it. Or you can go to home And again, pick the high contrast only option, and that's where you're going to see it. Now, notice it's because I'm in dark mode, but you have either way you can do this. You will find that it is obviously, I'm not sure why it says that that's a great color, but we're not going to do that. So that's terrible. I like the pink. All right. So those are some options that you have for color contrast. So again, remember that if it is bigger font, so if I go and I change the font to 18, now I probably have a few more options. See, and now I have more options here than what I had before because I changed the font size. So now I actually have a lighter pink that I could use, and that would still be accessible. So depending upon the font size. Okay, so now we've taken a look at that. So the next thing I want to talk about is font choice. Okay, so choices matter. So pretty font isn't a best choice, which is I made that graphic today because I was like, I need to, so everybody can see. That's lovely. And actually a screen reader would read it, but the problem is someone who is visually impaired would not be able to read that, or it would be very difficult for them to read. So you want to use one of these fonts, Arial, Calibri, Verdana, or Aptos. Minimum of 11 point. 12 is preferred, but if you must get a little smaller, 11 will do. Avoid scripts like you see in the image, and use bold or heading styles for emphasis. Not underlining or italics, because those are harder to read for people with dyslexia or low vision. So let's go back to Word. Now, if you were paying attention, you see that when I started my document, it decided to make everything Aptos. Well, I don't really want it Aptos, so I'm going to select the entire document, and now I'm going to go here, and I'm going to choose the first option that I got to, which is this one. So now my entire document is in the right or the best font, and I didn't have to do anything. I just highlighted the entire document and I made sure that it was the correct font size. I'll make it a little bigger for everybody else because there we go. All right, so now you can see, and I can't make the ribbon bigger, unfortunately. I can only make the document bigger. So,
Paige, when you chose the whole document to change the font size,
Mhm.
did it ignore the heading font sizes that were already set?
No, no,
It,
it just changed the font style, not the size.
I got you.
Okay. So it's still heading 1, but now it's actually the right font type. And if I wanted to, and I wanted this even bigger than 20, I could make it 48. It doesn't matter. It's still going to be a heading 1. I can change and manipulate the size of the font once I have tagged it appropriately. Okay, let me repeat that. You can manipulate the font size if you have tagged it appropriately, and it will still meet accessibility. So now I am going to change this font size to, I don't know, 16. And so now I've made that bigger, but it's still a subtitle. And that's why you don't see it over here. All right. So that's how you get to the correct font size. All right. So now, by the way, remember that I'm giving you all of this, both the presentation and a whole document. So now let's talk about images, alt text, and long descriptions. So every meaningful image needs alt text. So you can do that in several different ways in um, in Word. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask here. So what you're going to do is you can put the image in, and then you can right click on it and add the alt text, or you can you can wait until you do your accessibility check, and then you can use there is an alt text tool within that, which will also allow you to either put in the alt text or generate Copilot will generate alt text for you. But remember that it needs to be meaningful. So how do you get meaningful or effective alt text? So you're going to use the ACORN method, which is and that is accurate, concise, objective, relevant, and necessary. So if it's not necessary and it's just pretty, you can simply mark it as decorative and move on. So you have a couple options. Now, alt text, as I said before, you have to understand that it should only be roughly 125 characters. No more than 150, though. If you need more than that, you actually need to build in the build in a long description. And we're going to talk about where to put long descriptions as well in just a second. So you're going to tailor whatever the content is to the purpose. And then you're going to make sure you describe what you see, not what you think. So here are some good and bad examples of alt text. So we have a picture of cells. Microscope, that's not very great. So picture is anytime you are starting your alt text, you don't need to put anything in like image of, picture of, or anything like that. So you can leave those words out, and you can have more characters to actually describe what it is you're doing. So then you also want to make sure that if you have a chart, the bar chart showing student enrollment by program, business administration, you want to make sure that you are descriptive enough that you have not left out any important information that was in the oh, for good grief, I just want to download it. That was in the information. So long descriptions when alt text isn't enough. So there are a couple options here when you are in a Word document. So here are your choices. So description and adjacent body text, that can be like figure 1 and then a description. Data table accompanying a chart. So so you can put in a table that describes the chart. So like a data table, like how you created the chart. You might want to add that in addition to it. Linked a separate document or into the appendix. And then some kind of hierarchical description so that you can kind of send someone somewhere else. So I'm going to now go back to my lovely document here. And I'm going to share the right screen. And from here, in Word, you're going to choose Insert, Picture, happens to be from this device. I'm going to grab a picture. And I will. So there it is. So now I have a picture and I've put it in. So if you can see that my little accessibility person is showing me that there is an issue. So within Word, if you want to permanently turn on the accessibility checker, this is how you do that. So it's always running and reminding you as you're building. So you're going to go to File, I clicked on. And you're going to go to options. And you're going to go to accessibility. Now, here you have quite a few different things to choose from. This is the top paragraph is the accessibility assistant that shows up in the status bar, and it will also show up inline in the document. That's the little person that you saw. That is those two boxes. That's why those are checked. And you can see that there are other things. So enable the option to generate alt text using AI as turned on in my account. Expand all headings when opening a document. That is because I want that so that I can see that table of contents. So these are your accessibility features within Word that you can turn on so that it applies to all of your documents when you are opening them.
Paige, when you're working in dark mode and you set up the color of your fonts, what does it look like to me where I'm not in dark mode?
So that's when I showed you when you go to view and you go to switch,
Ah,
that's what you would see.
thank you.
Yeah. So it just depends. Again, it is a personal preference. I prefer to be in dark mode because it's less tiring on my eyes when you're staring at a screen all day. So that is my personal choice. So you can switch back and forth and you can choose. Now, you can also program, I mean, there's 100 things you can do, but most everything of mine is in dark mode. I have it set my windows so that it automatically does everything in dark. So if you want to see it in a different mode, you can switch just so you could figure it out. Also notice that you have an immersive reader at the top that lets you experience adjusting text size, spacing, and more. And also you can hear it out loud. Just understand that that's not a screen reader, but it's kind of like a screen reader. But let's go back and go back down to the picture. And now what I want to do is I can click on the picture. And as soon as I click on the picture, I get a new tab at the top of my ribbon. And that tab is picture format. When I click on picture format, I have lots of options, but alt text is one of those options. So I can go ahead and click on this, and I'm really curious. So this is the generate alt text for me option. And I'm going to go ahead and click on that because I'm really curious as to what Copilot is going to say about this image. Interesting. Okay, so I was curious as whether or not it was going to actually label the characters appropriately because they are from Star Wars, and that's a whole copyright thing, but whatever. So that's that's actually a pretty good description. However, it's not quite right. So I would just go ahead and approve the alt text. And then what I can do is I can now edit this. So I would say I would start this out with characters and remove all the rest of that. And this is a little longer than 150 characters, I'm pretty sure. But I'm going to leave it because Microsoft said it was okay. So I'm going to go with it. Now, if I wanted to take this picture and I really wanted to get a long description, I could then go to AI and get a long description and say that I was talking about the Star Wars canons and how does this image relate to Star Wars canons. So, and then get a long description that I could then add either as an appendix or I could add it underneath as a figure. And so on. So there are some options for alt text and how you can add in a long description. It is a preference. There are no hard and fast rules for that, and how you actually put or where you put in the alt text. Okay. All right. So charts. Let's go back. All right, so now I want to talk about some charts. So alt text for charts, you can do a formula if you want to use generative AI. For example, I could have a pie chart, a line graph chart, or a bar chart. But what I could say is, what is the kind of chart showing what are the main data points with key insights? So I could take a picture of that chart and ask AI to give me the alt text based on that formula that you see on this slide right here, right there. So I could use that formula in order to provide alt text that I could then use within the document. Okay, so let's keep on moving. As I see, it's 417. So now I want to talk about tables as well as charts. So let's go to tables first. So I already have a table in our document. And we're going to make sure that tables are used for only for data, not for layout, and never trying to make things pretty as far as what it looks like on the screen. So when I go to back to my Word document, now I can scroll up and now I have this table. So you can see it here. So as soon as I click in my table, I get two new design options at the top. I get table design and table layout. So these are two new options. So I'm going to go ahead and click on table design. So I'm going to start. So from here, where I need to begin is looking at this column or this segment over here on the left, header row and first column. So if I'm looking at this chart, I only need a header row. So I'm going to uncheck the first column. Now, if I want to make this pretty, I can change, and you can see that it doesn't change the focus. So what it just made it banded. And notice that again, I have the high contrast color still on here, so that, and you can see that these two that are chosen still meet accessibility contrast. So what I also want to do is that I see that this is the title of the table, right? So I'm going to go ahead and copy that because I need to do one more thing. So when I click back in the table, I'm now going to go to table layout. So when I go to table layout, there's, again, this is probably something nobody's ever looked at. Over here on the left is properties. And if I go into alt text, that's where I'm going to put in the title of the table. I could put in a description if I wanted to, but at minimum, you should put in something for the title of the table. Now, when I click OK, you don't see that. So I see that my little accessibility guy is over here yelling at me, and it's telling me that I need to choose a different font, which is fine. And now it changed it so that it meets the accessibility piece. So, but what I did, again, there's two things that you have to do for tables. You have to make sure that you have gone into table design and either marked a header row at minimum or column row, or column, first column, excuse me, or both. Either way doesn't matter. And again, this is just banded rows and columns are about the color choices. Again, remember, this is not for any purpose. It is not for meaning. It is literally for visual, so it is not important. So it's not conveying anything. The important part, though, is that you have a header row. The second place you want to go is to table layout, and you want to go to properties and make sure that you put a title in the alt text option. So there are a few table do's and don'ts. Make sure you have a header row. Repeat header row across pages if you have multiple pages. And I'll have to do that on mine because it actually does go across. Keep tables simple and make sure you add the alt text to the title. Don't merge or split cells. Don't use blank rows, and don't use tables for layouts. Also, don't create a fake table with tabs and spaces. So it's pretty common sense otherwise. So if you need a chart, then when you are inserting your chart, you're going to make sure that you add alt text to your chart. So let's go back to Word. Lost. And to insert a chart, obviously you go to insert and your chart is here. There are a lot more things there, but we're going to go just for chart. And I'm going to pick a pie graph and I'm going to, I don't know, we'll just go with this one. Looks good to me. Click OK. And so now you can see that I have a chart. Now, Microsoft was also smart enough to open this nice little Excel spreadsheet where I can adjust whatever is in here to meet my needs for showing my chart. I'm going to leave it like it is because it's fine. All right, so now if I go to the chart design, where is it? Oh. So here is where your alt text would be for your chart design. So this is where you would use that formula that I said earlier, and that's where you would put in the alt text. So you, again, if it's a lot of information, this is obviously a very small chart, you're going to want to make sure that you use a long description to get all of the information from the chart into the document. Now, the next section is something it's more of informational than what I'm going to demonstrate because we only have like a few minutes left. But I did want to go over this because some people do use forms or build their forms in Word. So if you can build it in Microsoft or Google Forms, that's the best option. But if you have to build it in Microsoft Word, there are a few things you need to remember. First of all, you don't ever want to use the form tools in Microsoft because they're not accessible. So you want to make sure that you enable some things. Again, this is informational. You don't want to use, do not use Word's form controls. They do not export. So this is really key. If you're trying to start your form and then you want to move it into something else. So the last thing I want to go over is reading order. So reading order is how the screen reader processes content. It's literally linearly top to bottom. So floating text boxes and columns can disrupt the reading order. So make sure you use standard paragraphs over text boxes. Use the column feature if you need to have multi-columns in your document. Anchor text boxes in line with text if they're necessary. And then add page numbers in headers and footers. And also use, if you're using a watermark like draft, also state that in the status of the body text because the watermark will not show up. And then the last piece is actually using the accessibility checker that's built into Word. So anything that is an error, you need to fix. Anything that is a warning, it may or may not show you. So let's look at this before we're done with our time. All right, so if I go to check accessibility, now you see I have some hard to read context and it's going to tell me these are the 3 colors that I can choose to resolve the issue. It's not like any of those. And now it's telling me the chart is missing alt text. I'm just going to mark that as decorative. And now that's how you would fix those items within Word. The last thing is once you've gotten it to this point, if you can keep it here as a Word document, that's great. That's probably your best bet because when you manipulate this into a different form, you often lose some of the accessibility things that you've worked on. But if you needed this as a PDF, you could go to Save As, put a file name in, browse, change the file type to PDF, and click save. Now, in my options, I already have the appropriate things checked, so that's why I didn't open that, and I will give those to you as well. So in the last few minutes, I do want to make sure that you have everything that you need. So before you begin, you need to make sure that you set a title in the file, in the properties, that is in the info section. You set your document language. You use headings to build in hierarchy, no fake headings like bold, big bold text. All meaningful images have alt text. Decorative images are just marked as decorative. Visuals that need them have long descriptions, and you've come up with your own way to add them. Links that use descriptive text, no click here's. Color contrast meets the need, and now you know how to turn on the high contrast option within Word as well, so you can make sure that that matter, whether you're in light mode or dark mode, it doesn't matter. Color is not the only way that you're conveying any kind of information. Lists are actually built using the tools in Word, whether that's a numbered list or a bulleted list. Tables have designated at least a minimum of header row. The accessibility checker has met all of the things. And if you're exporting to PDF, you have that as well. So I'm going to give you a copy of this presentation. Maybe I can get to it. That is a copy of the presentation. And now I'm going to give you a copy of the document that goes into great detail on how to create an accessible document. So hopefully I have answered all of your questions, but if I didn't, please feel free to use that email address that you see on your screen to contact me. And I just didn't share those with the right everybody. Let me reshare these. I'm so sorry.
Paige, in the 2 minutes that are left,
Yep.
I know we always tell people to do save as for an accessible PDF. What
Yep.
about exporting to creating an accessible PDF?
Export, what do you mean?
Is one of the options in the file thing is export.
No, it's, oh, why would you do that?
Yeah, Arlene do a save as. And
But here's the issue. So it says convert to PDF using Adobe. That's not necessarily going to get your that's not how I would ever, I would never.
you want to make sure your tags are saved.
Correct.
And
And
then
it, yeah, and you also have the option to save as Adobe PDF, which is basically the same thing as exporting. But the problem is it doesn't always save your tags that you've created. So if you can keep it as a Word document, you should keep it as a Word document. If you are worried about someone manipulating it, then you can lock the document down so that they only have view rights. And then it doesn't matter. They can't manipulate your document. Even if you shared a link with them, that's still your document. That now, hopefully I shared those this time the right way.
And then the other question, the another Sherry, she wants to know about long descriptions, about putting, where do we put them? Should we be putting long descriptions in the appendix and linking to it? My
Yes.
general answer is yes, because you don't want to interrupt the flow of reading. But
Correct.
meanwhile, the person using the screen reader, they have an option on their own to click it at any point in time and go to the appendix, but it doesn't interrupt the flow for
Correct.
anyone else.
So you have to know how to add bookmarks in order to do an appendix. So if anybody needs to know how to do that, I'm pretty sure it's in that document that massive 21-page document that I created. So if it's not in there, please let me know and I will add it to that document so that it's in there.
I do want to thank everybody for giving us their time this afternoon and watching this session and asking your questions. We will be sharing out the recording as well as the document that Paige prepared. You might more easily find some of your answers by just going through the document, but for some of us, we can find the steps in the document, but we need to see it. So you'll have the recording and go back and you can watch it. Thank you to everybody, and we will see you at our